welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi. My name is Rachel, and I talk about true crime and various different mysteries. If that's something that you enjoy, please stick around. I know, it has been forever since I've posted. I apologize. I changed up my equipment, and then I went to go film this exact case, and my stuff completely quit working. But most importantly, we are back. We are back in commission. We are going at it. And today's case is not any less than the rest. Today's case is about Herbert Baumeister. Herb Baumeister was born on April 7th, 1947 in Indianapolis. His parents, Elizabeth and Herbert E. Baumeister. His father was an anesthesiologist of Indianapolis, and his mother was a homemaker. And Herb was the oldest of 4 children, so he had 3 other siblings. And from all accounts, Herb had a really good childhood. Everything was pretty well normal, uneventful, until he began to get into his teens. This is when Herb really began to show strange interests and almost like an obsessive type, all surrounding death. He was known to play with dead animals or just be very curious about them. He even took dead birds into school and was caught putting them on some of his teachers' desks. Herb's odd behavior only began to escalate and become more and more erratic. He was failing classes. He was a huge distraction to other kids in his class, even to the point that Herb was caught urinating on his teacher's desk. I don't know about you, but his teachers don't sound as though they make enough money to deal with that. As I'm sure any sane person could guess, this led to Herb's teachers reaching out to his parents saying, hey, like, your kid's being super weird. He brought me dead birds and now he's like urinating on my desk. Have you noticed anything weird? Like, what's going on with him at home? And Herb's parents then, also commented that they noticed that there was kind of some weird stuff going on with their kid. They weren't quite sure what to do about it. So their decision was to get him psychologically tested and really just get him a psych eval. And so after seeing a psychiatrist, Herb was diagnosed with schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. I think it's important to note that this was the 1960s, so there wasn't a lot of understanding or treatment available at the time. So their treatment for this at the time was electroshock. Even that wasn't considered a cure. It was just to make the patient more docile and cooperative, really. So with that in mind, his parents, even with Herb's severe diagnosis, they went ahead and passed on the electroshock. They're like, nah, like that's a little extreme. We could probably just handle this at home. Herb managed to graduate high school, and he went on to attend Indiana University in 1965. However, it would only take a semester, and Herb ended up dropping out. Of course, his father, being a doctor, really wanted to emphasize education onto his son and really pushed him into going back. The following year, Herb ended up going back to school and starting again. He returned to Indiana University in 1967 and made it a whole nother semester and quit again. However, Herb's 2 semesters he spent at Indiana University didn't seem to go in vain. During his time there, Herb met Julie Sater, who was a part-time Indiana University student. They were both members of the Young Republicans at IU group, and that's where they met, and they hit it off immediately. They both seemed to share the same goals, the same morality, the same everything. They shared a lot in common. One of those things happened to be they both wanted to end up starting their own business at some point in their life. As you can imagine, with these 2 lovebirds, it wasn't long, and in November of 1971, Julie and Herb were married. I think it's really important to note that during this time, Herb was still dealing with his mental illness, and as anything, he would have his struggles, his good days, his bad days, and Julie was his rock. She was always beside him, always helped him through any of the situation. She was very understanding. Now, I did read that 6 months after they were married, Herb's father had him committed to a mental institution. It's not really stated as to why or if there was a specific incident that caused this. And Julie never wavered. She sat at home for 6 months and just waited the time out, and she was there waiting for him when he was able to get out of the mental institution. Julie had so much faith, and a lot of faith in Herb, a lot of faith in their relationship, and she just stuck it out. She was a loyal ride or die. So Julie and Herb were living in Indianapolis, and with his mental illness, Herb was really struggling to find work. He was struggling to be consistent in his work, and finding consistent work. Thankfully, Herb had a prominent doctor from the town. You know, pretty much everybody knew him, and his dad was able to help him get a job at the Indianapolis Star as a copy boy, which I'm not 100% sure what a copy boy would be. I'm assuming it's exactly what it sounds like, which is just somebody who makes copies and delivers them throughout the business. I don't know. I really don't know. But he managed to land him a job at the Indianapolis Star. During his job at the Indianapolis Star, Herb was noted as being very hardworking, very dedicated to his job, very dedicated to getting the job done at the end of the day. But over time, his coworkers would begin to describe him as moody, irritable, just very unpleasant to work with. There wasn't much detail as to why you could assume this, but he was just one of those people in the office that you just avoid because they're jerks, I guess. He was a little overbearing and bitter. Came to a boiling point that Herb felt as though he did not receive the praise that he felt was deserved to him by his supervisor. And since he didn't get, the big praise about his job, Herb ended up quitting. He, after that, found a job at the BMV. Where else do moody and irritable people go but the BMV? Sorry, I'm just kidding. It's just a video. Don't hate me. So Herb had found his job. He was at the BMV, and he was there for quite a while, actually. And he was still, again, a very hardworking, dedicated worker, and worked his way up to program director, in fact. Unfortunately, in 1985, Herb was fired from the BMV. For what, you ask? Well, it is alleged that he was caught urinating on a letter that was addressed to the governor of Indiana at the time, which was Robert Orr. This makes me wonder, what his deal was with peeing on things. I can't wrap my head around it, but after Herb's little tinkle time at the BMV, the next couple of years, he had been arrested a few times for drinking and driving mainly. There was one incident that he was arrested for actually stealing his friend's car. And somehow all of those things that he was arrested for, he was never actually tried for. The charges never held up. I'm not sure why that happened or how, but they did. And he got away with it. During Herb's employment at the BMV, him and Julie had ended up having 3 children. And now, with really no job prospects or nothing really going on, Herb decided that it was time for him to stay at home and actually take care of the kids while Julie went out and went back to teaching, because that was really her main job that she did. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy who is just off his rocker, it seems like, within the workplace, was now going to be a stay-at-home dad. Oh my gosh, no way. But I find it fascinating. Herb actually, his role as a father in comparison to his role as an employee were completely 2 different sides to the same coin. Herb really loved being a dad. He loved being a parent, and he loved taking care of his children, playing with his children, and investing time and energy into his children and their relationship. So when Herb became like the stay-at-home dad, it actually worked out fairly well for the family in general. They were still financially struggling a little bit, but it worked out in everybody's favor. In 1988, Julie and Herb actually borrowed some money from Herb's mother in order to start their own business. Now, they opened up their own thrift store called Save-A-Lot, not to be confused with the Save-A-Lot grocery stores, but these were in fact thrift stores. And they were a huge hit. So much so that the second year in operation, they ended up opening up a second location. Life was really, really good. Herb and Julie and the kids were finally really seeing success. And to celebrate their success as a family, they went and bought their dream home. They bought the beautiful Fox Hollow Farm, and it was massive. This $1 million home was exactly what their family was looking for. Julie considered it a really nice getaway from kind of the hustle bustle of the everyday, in town, because they were just out of Indianapolis, just north of there actually, in this farm, and the kids could go outside and play, and they wouldn't have to worry about random people coming up onto their property, because it's a fairly large property, and if they're going to come onto the property, it's hard not to see them. So she felt very safe in a good place for her children to be there. So it really looked like the Baumeisters. Things were looking up for them. At least that's how it would look from the outside. The success found in their new business did not change Herb and how he was in a workplace environment. Working as business partners, Julie now received the brunt end of Herb and how he was within the workplace. Instead of treating her like a business partner, he was treating her like an employee. And in order just to save the confrontation and really not try and drive it any further, she wasn't giving any energy to it. Julie was just staying low and just let it go, So on the weekends, frequently, Julie would take her and the kids to her mother's condo out on Lake Wawasee, just to kind of get away and give Herb his space and avoid, the nasty attitude. Herb would stay back, and he would state that when he was staying back, he was keeping an eye on the stores, following up with each of them, checking in on them. The Save-A-Lot employees would describe Herb as being neglectful, careless. Half the time, Herb didn't even show up, and if he did, he was rude and just very difficult to deal with. This unfortunately began the deterioration of their newly found successful business. Employees began to quit. Nobody's going to tolerate that type of work environment. I don't care who you are, that's just unacceptable. And things only continued to get darker from there. While his marriage and also his business seemed to be whittling down and crumbling before him, Herb kept a weird fascination and focus on his pool house. Fox Hollow Farm had this cute little pool house. Herb insisted that it be decorated, and the way that he would decorate it is he always had a fully stocked bar, and he had mannequins that he had set up all around the pool in very fancy, pool party type clothes. He wanted to create the scene almost like it was a pool party and wanted to keep it like that. It was very, very strange. That's one very strange note I can bring out of this. Probably something you'll never forget. This guy set up mannequins around his pool. I don't know. Everybody has their own thing, but Herb had a deep, dark secret. Herb began to frequent the gay bars in downtown Indianapolis. And it's really unknown as to how long this has been going on, but it is alleged, that Herb was in fact gay, but was in a very big, severe denial of it. And the theory is that he married Julie in order to cover up the fact that he was gay. Herb believed that being gay would ruin his image in the public eye and to his father. Yes, I'm sure being gay is going to be the part that's going to ruin your life, not what follows. Weirdly enough, around 1991, men began to go missing from gay bars in downtown Indianapolis. And weirdly enough, 1991 is when Herb and his family moved to Fox Hollow Farm. Virgil Vandegrift, who was a retired county sheriff, was now running his own private investigation firm, became involved in the case in 1994. In speaking to families of the missing men, he began to piece together the picture of a potential serial killer. All missing men were last seen leaving a gay bar from downtown Indianapolis with an unknown man. With his findings, Virgil went down to the Marion County Police Department. And at the time, the gay lifestyle was not very well received in the area. or accepted or respected, and the police didn't take any of it seriously. During this same time in 1994, Herb's son Eric, who had been playing at the border of the woods on their property, had stumbled across something very disturbing, a discovery of something that looked like a human skull. Now, when Eric found this, he dug it out and took it back up to the house to show Julie, who of course was mortified by what her son had found. She instructed him to show her where he had found it at. While looking, the bones that were out there really looked like it could complete an entire skeleton. Julie immediately, of course, thought that this was suspicious and goes to Herb and says, what is this? Why did he find this out there? And Herb comes up with some story about his father, who was, again, an anesthesiologist, and stated that it was just an anatomical skeleton from his father's office that he just buried out there. He didn't think anything of it, and that's all that it was. It was just a fake skeleton. Julie ended up taking his word on this, and I'm not saying that she believed him, but she definitely just didn't feel the need to push it any further at the time. Virgil, the private investigator, had found some very promising leads. A man by the name of Tony had an insane story to tell. He claimed that he met a man by the name of Brian Smart at a gay bar in downtown Indianapolis. And him and Brian were having drinks and talking all night and having a really, really good time. Now, Brian invited Tony back to his house, and Tony said, sure, why not? We're having a good time. Let's continue this. When he got into Brian's car, he did notice that Brian's car had an Ohio plate, and it was a white vehicle. It was just random things that he just happened to notice on his way. Again, for this story to make a little bit more sense, keep in mind, they just got done drinking at a bar, and Tony, he was a little sloshy at this point on the drive north. He knew that they went north for a ways. He wasn't very descriptive because, again, he was probably under the influence of quite a bit of alcohol at that time and wasn't able to recall exact details. But he knows that once they left the bar, they went north for a ways, about 30 minutes or so, and they pull up at this gigantic house. It's a huge house. Tony was very impressed, and Brian takes him up to the pool house. Tony said that he felt immediately weirded out. Can you guess why? I'm going to throw a guess out there and say, maybe because the weird mannequins all around the pool. Brian offered Tony some drinks and said, hey, do you want to continue this party? Let's keep on drinking. And at this point, Tony's like, nah, I'm good. I need to sober up a little bit. It is getting late. I don't want to get too, to the point that I can't, function or leave. I'm good. Brian then asked Tony if he had ever tried erotic asphyxiation before, and if he would like to try it with him. Tony stated that when Brian was asking him this, he seemed extremely hyped up, almost like he, just did a bunch of cocaine and he was super hyped up about doing this, and he didn't want to upset him. And so he's like, yeah, okay, sure, we can try this. Now, with Brian Smart's instructions, Tony took a hose from the machine that cleans the pool and wrapped it around Brian's neck while he pleasured himself. Then the two switched positions. Tony felt the hose go around his neck and begin to tighten. He realized that it did not stop tightening. Realizing that Brian Smart was, in fact, probably trying to kill him, Tony, in the most amazing thought process possible, acted as though he had gone unconscious. And finally, in doing that, the hose loosened off of his neck. When Tony opened his eyes, it completely shocked Brian Smart because he thought that he was dead. Smart thought he killed Tony. But here we are, and your victim is alive. This is where Brian Smart tries to save face and act like, it was unintentional, it was an accident. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. But I think I'm done for the night. Would you like a ride home? He was in a huge hurry to get Tony the F out of his house and was like, okay, I'll give you a ride back. Let's go. And he even tried to cover it up by saying, hey, how about we meet up again next week and do it again? And just for agreement purposes, I guess, I don't know, of not upsetting Brian, Tony agreed. He was like, okay, yeah, it was great. Let's meet up. And of course, when the next week rolled around, neither of which showed up. So with Tony speaking to Virgil, giving him all this information, Virgil finally had a few things to kind of go off of. A little bit of a description, a name, a vehicle, a type of plate. He was starting to gather some of that information. And after this point, they tried desperately to find Brian Smart for almost a year, in fact, which just kept on leading them to dead ends. Now, in August of 1995, Mr. Tony, our eyewitness, was sitting in a gay bar in downtown Indianapolis, and he looks over, and who does he see? He sees the familiar face of Brian Smart. This man right here, Tony, he is a true hero because that man gets up, goes outside because he knows what kind of car it is. He just doesn't know the plates yet. He finds the car that he rode in with Brian Smart, writes down the license plate number. He takes this information back to Virgil, and Virgil runs the plates. And who could it possibly be registered to? Someone with the name of Herb Baumeister. November of 1995, detectives arrive at Fox Hollow Farm and are asking if they can search the property. Of course, Herb refuses, and so does Julie, because, again, she's trying to support him and believe everything that he is saying. She really, truly just wants to believe that her husband had nothing to do with this. Now, the Hamilton County officials would not give a warrant to search the property on this because of what they considered flimsy evidence on Herb Baumeister and his involvement in these missing persons. And there was little that Virgil could do at this point. His office, their hands were tied until they were able to find more evidence. Randomly, amazingly, in June of 1996, Julie appeared in Virgil's office. She was distraught. She stated that her husband was having a nervous breakdown. Their business had crumbled, and she had plans of filing for divorce. She was done. But with all this going on, and I don't blame her one bit, Julie needed to know the truth. The skull that her son had brought her that day had been haunting her since the day that she saw it, and since the day that she saw the pile of bones with it, had been haunting her. And she had to know the truth behind all of it. She granted Virgil and the investigators permission to search the property. What was found was much more horrific than what they had originally anticipated. The property had gravel that was lined up against, a patch of grass. And looking further at this gravel, because it just didn't look right, it wasn't actually gravel at all. It was, in fact, charred up, crushed up bones. And the forensics team was able to determine that this was indeed human bone. This search unearthed 5,000 bone fragments that were believed to belong to a total of 11 men, only 8 of which that they could identify. Now, in all of this, my first question was, where is Herb? During this time that the search was going on, Herb was actually visiting his mother. And once he realized that there was a warrant out for his arrest, this man fled and he ran to Canada. A group of hikers at the Pinery Provincial Park in Ontario found the body of Herb Baumeister on July 3rd, 1996, with a single gunshot wound to the forehead. Herb left a suicide note, apologizing to his wife, but didn't make any mention about any of the murders. There are some beliefs out there that Herb was also the I-70 strangler, which, look it up, there's definitely a lot of similarities. There are a lot of things of evidence that point in that direction. What I find so unfortunate about this is with Herb's death, his suicide, we will never really know what the true motive was behind this. My personal theory was that maybe he was ashamed of being gay and he felt like his parents wouldn't be able to accept it, or his family wouldn't. I think that he envied openly gay men. I really do. I think that he was mad because he felt like he couldn't have that kind of freedom in his life. whether it be sexually or socially, but that he was unable to have that he wanted to take away that opportunity of others to enjoy that freedom. That's my personal theory. Don't come for me. This is just my guess, okay? What are your thoughts on this? Have you heard of this case? I first heard of this case, honestly, on Ghost Adventures when they were investigating the Fox Hollow Farms, because you cannot talk about this case and not talk about the aftermath, which is this place is alleged to be very haunted. So that's it for today's case. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you have any cases that you'd like for me to cover, let me know. I will definitely be working on doing better at being more consistent on posting my stuff. Hopefully, so far, I have been filming for, the duration of my case, and I have yet to have my equipment fail me. Thank goodness. Thank God for that. Yeah, so if you enjoyed today's case, give me a like down below, hit subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye.